Francesca di Mottola, you're an Emmy nominee for Outstanding Production Design for a period or fantasy program for your work on The Great. The show is set in 18th century Russia, and while it's not strictly faithful to history, was this a time period or locale that you designed for in the past?
No, but it's also not a time, well, it is a time frame, but not a specific locale. I'd say we're not really faithful to the period, as I'm sure you know from the title of the show. So it's like a mishmash of different. The palace we created from scratch, that we built from scratch, is inspired by so many different palaces all around the world, I have to say. So yeah, it is. It takes place in Russia, but yeah.
And having that much freedom and having that many things that you can draw inspiration from, does that make it easier, like open things up, or is it so many options that it becomes more difficult?
No, I think it definitely makes it more fun, because I think that the design is very much in the scripts and in the characters. So you sort of, I think that's the starting point for every single set that we've done on this, and every scene that we've done within sets that existed. For example, in season 2, we rebuilt within a lot of existing sets, and we rebuilt completely new sets inspired by the scenes. And therefore, yeah, just being able to source from being really wide with our research, I think it's a great source of inspiration. And it's not a challenge, no, not at all. I mean, I think there's always something in the script that will spark the initial research, and then from there it can go really broad and we need to sort of narrow down. But yeah, sometimes maybe I do get lost a bit, and I need to sort of narrow down and yeah, solidify. But
how many, this season, of course, there was a coup, and then sort of the repair after that. Like, how many new sets were you building, or sets that you completely redesigned over the course of the season?
I think so many, because as I mentioned, we sort of built within the sets that we had a lot. So and they were so, like, I'd say in some cases sets got to be completely redesigned. So we had, for example, a coronation scene. Well, yes, as you said, like during the coup, the palace was partly destroyed, and that, to me, I considered like new sets, because we literally had to rebuild part of the palace to being able to tackle the destruction. And then throughout the episodes, we see the reconstruction of the palace, and it's quite gradual. And we've got rooms which we created chapels, and well, kind of a chapel cathedral within what used to be Catherine's, well, Peter the Great, but Peter the not great, Peter the Third's stateroom office. We created a chapel within that. So that was quite a big build, like a 2 months build within an existing set. So a completely repurpose of that set. And I'd say for sure 2/3 or more of the sets were rebuilt and reconfigured and turned back to being what they were. So it was quite a fun challenge in terms of turning rooms around.
And how fun was it to turn the palace into a war zone when you're starting the season?
It was great to start in that way, because it was sort of, from what we had built, sort of destroying that and then rebuilding was quite fun. I think, we didn't do the opposite. We didn't get to do the opposite in season 1. So that was like, that's how we started, and we had enough prep time to do that. So I think we sort of found the right spaces where that destruction would read more than other spaces. And therefore, yeah, I think we had enough time to explore. And as I said, as I mentioned before, rebuild part of the palace for the destruction, and be quite accurate about the reconstruction as we went along. So I think that was challenging, absolutely, because we didn't build in the beginning with that in mind. But fun. We got to be creative with that.
And with the balance of power changing in season 2, beginning with the coup and then Catherine in power, how did the look of the series evolve as we're changing that sort of balance in the characters and in the politics?
Well, no, that's a really good question because, that was very much part of the conversations with Tony McNamara, the showrunner, right at the start, is like when she sort of takes over and after her coronation, does the palace change? And I feel like we do that in specific scenes. We do that in the stateroom, which is her office, through set decoration. There's hints to that in specific scenes, but there's not a major change because she has no time for that. So that was part of like understanding the character. She's running a country and she's struggling with getting to terms on how to do that. And she's got Peter in house arrest, and and everyone loved him, and he was the fun one. And so she's struggling with understanding how do people so I feel like as much as we wanted to do that, and potentially we're doing it more this season, we didn't get around to doing it in a very obvious way. So I think it was like it here and then, like with specific scenes. So she hosts a very boring philosophy breakfast dedicated to Diderot, and then in that room it's like the architecture and the dressing changes completely, and it all goes very formal, and people react to that in a very bad way. So I think we sort of through design tell her sort of strive to bring order to this palace and introduce idea of enlightenment, and I guess her strive to sort of create order somehow is shown through design. But then it's in specific scenes, and then the following scene we've got a baby shower, and everyone just it all rebels against that. So it sort of fluctuates, I think.
And you're specifically nominated for the Emmy for the season finale episode, Wedding. What about the production design in that episode stands out to you? Are you especially proud of?
From that episode. So in that episode, we built a war-torn village from scratch. So I think that episode is most representative of an entire new build for that season. And that was built on location, and it was supposed to be, it's supposed, so there's like the Velementov, he's the head of the military, and he's got his headquarters in an abandoned church. And I'm really proud of the process for that, because it was actually, we don't get to have a long prep on this in terms of like the blocks. And so it was a spur of the moment sort of decision, let's go for that. And the process of the design, from the design to the build to shooting, was quite short. So I think as a team, we really pulled it off in terms of getting quite a lot of detail in that village. And so that includes our amazing set decorating team and set decorator who's nominated obviously for an Emmy with me, and Monica Albert, and creating that world outside of our palace, I think was an absolute challenge. So I'm really pleased with that. And I think episode 10 also then shows how we reused sets and built sets within, which is the wedding right at the end. The nursery, I'm very, very proud of Paul's nursery, because it's a completely different room to any other that we've seen before in season 1 or 2, and it's very colorful, and it's a room that is supposedly designed by Peter for his child. So I think that room there's so much detail that went into the design of that room. So I'm particularly proud of the nursery, which appears in episode 10.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your work on the show this season and on your Emmy nomination. And thank you so much for talking with me about it.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Bill Groom, you're nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Production Design for a period or fantasy program for your work on Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, your 4th nomination for this show, if I'm not mistaken. And you're nominated for a couple of the episodes, Maisel versus Lennon, The Cut Contest, and How Do You Get to Carnegie Hall? What stands out about those episodes for you in terms of your design?
Well, the biggest challenge for season 4, I think, was dealing with the limitations that were set by COVID in New York. And we we had a script that had basically an old vaudeville theater that had been turned into a burlesque theater. And it just wasn't going to be possible to go to a Broadway theater, which is probably what we would have done had it not been for COVID. So we built it. We have a very large stage here at Steiner Studios. We looked all over the tri-state area for a space large enough, but Steiner happens to have what was formerly used to build PT boats in World War II. It's quite a large space. And we were able to get that for the season. And it carries through into this season as well. But we built basically a Broadway theater inside this space. And that happened with a number of other sets for the season, sets that we might have gone on location, but because of the limitations for the COVID problems, we built on stage.
And that Gentleman's Club, building that from the ground up, so much detail, so much scope. How long did it take to construct just that set?
I think it was about 3 months. I've not looked back at the calendar, but it was about 3 months, I think, from the time we started drawing it until we put it on camera.
And the centerpiece of it is, this giant chandelier, which actually came from My Fair Lady. What made you think of getting that particular chandelier to be, the kind of showcase for this?
We just started looking all over the country for a giant chandelier, and that happened to be available to us. It came from Los Angeles to New York on a special trailer that was built for it. It's a little wider than 8 feet. And it was in terrible shape when it arrived here. I don't think it's been used in decades, but we hired a chandelier restoration company to come in and restore that chandelier with all new crystals and wiring. And it works well in that space. It's just the right size.
And I understand some of the backstage areas of the club, you actually repurposed kind of some of the old sets from the show for that. Do you remember what sets went into that?
In service to the budget, there was a point at which it was going to be so much money to build all of this, and I thought, how can we do this? And I wanted to divide the backstage up into several rooms, and I started thinking about what rooms could be used to do that. And one I remember was Joel's bedroom at his parents' house from an earlier season. That's one of the rooms, and I don't recall all of them, but I think we used 3 or 4 old sets that we put together, changed the moldings and the paint, and basically made the backstage work, because that's as big a footprint really as the theater itself. So on one side you have the theater with the stage and stage house. Behind that you have the backstage area with a prop room and a manager's office and a night watchman's desk and all of that stuff.
And it's not just the building of the physical set that makes it so impressive. It's also the details that make it feel really lived in. How intricate was that set decoration process to make it feel like, to have that age, to have that history and that feel?
Well, I think that's one of the things that kind of informed the amount of time it took, because we had a great crew. Every season we've had a great crew, and this, I have to say, in season 5, I probably got the best crew I've ever had in my life on anything. And so it's funny, in an interview not long ago, an interviewer asked, what have you learned over the seasons of doing Maisel? And I said, I learned who to fire and who not to fire. We've kept pretty much the same crew we started with. There were a few people who didn't work as well. Now we have a crew that's really works together nicely, and that for the theater, we had a separate construction crew and a separate paint crew from all of the other sets we were doing for Maisel. And we had a great paint crew for that, and just beautifully detailed work. So yeah, I'm grateful for all the crews we had for that.
In the finale, I remember this one particular show-stopping scene in the Wolford, the Gentleman's Club, where the camera kind of tracks through this burlesque performance on these multiple levels. Like how complex was that to set up and create?
Well, it was less complex to create than it was to shoot. I mean, that's something Amy wanted, and she kind of wanted Amy, our showrunner, Amy Sherman Palladino, and writer, director. She wanted a kind of rear window approach to that, with different little scenes happening in each of those little quads in the space. And so it was very tricky to shoot, because she often does very complicated camera moves. I joked with her that she's never seen a 360-degree angle she didn't like. And so she's always moving the camera around. And even in that particular scene, you go into that set, but then you come around the back, and then you go up to the top, and you go across, and you go in and back and around and out again. So our camera department, visual effects, we managed to make that work for her.
And I know because of COVID, you had to build a lot of sets instead of going to locations you might have gone to. Did you shoot very much on location this season, or?
We did as the season went on. The limitations eased up a bit, or our fear of what the limitations were going to be changed a little as we went along, and we were able to go on location a bit. But in the beginning, in the first couple of months of shooting, I think we pretty much stayed on stage. The parents' house, Moish and Shirley's house, that we had shot in season 3 on location in Forest Hills, Queens, we recreated that on stage, with the front yard, the street in front, the houses across the street, all of that, because we weren't going to be able to go back to Forest Hills, Queens. And one of the big issues was parking trucks in New York, and that wasn't even allowed in certain neighborhoods once the COVID problem started.
And then you have, at the end of the season, Lenny Bruce at Carnegie Hall. Did you build that? How much did you build, or was that the location?
We built some of the backstage area, but we were lucky to be able to go there for enough time to shoot that whole scene at Carnegie Hall. That's typically not true, but because they were kind of shut down for the pandemic, we were able to go in there for several days. I had worked at Carnegie Hall many years earlier on a concert that George Carlin did for HBO. And as I recall, we had 3 hours to set up a set and film the show. And this time we were able to go in for several days. So Carnegie Hall is normally booked several times a day. And so we were able to shoot there, and visual effects helped us with the audience and all of that.
Well, congratulations on this season of the show and how much you were able to build and create for it. And congratulations. Thank you. And congratulations again on your Emmy nomination. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Gianna Costa, you earned your second straight Emmy nomination this year, Outstanding Production Design for Variety, Reality, or Competition Series. Last year, you were nominated as an art director, and this year as a production designer on the show. Was that a big change in the scope of your role on the show? What was that like this year?
Oh yeah, I was definitely switching gears, and I had to try to step back from the art director role, which was very hands-on in a way with, the day-to-day. And, it was a little tough transitioning because I still was stepping my toe into being an art director, but definitely was really happy to transition into this role. Like, really happy about it.
And on a show with this much, flamboyant performance and creativity, is there a particular feeling of artistic freedom as a designer?
Oh yeah, there definitely is. A little bit of freedom to kind of think outside the box and, try to make things as fun and fresh as possible. And we tape a new episode every other day. So I was trying to be adjust and think on your toes. Is that the way to put it? And just really try to execute things in a fun, fresh, possible way. It's lots of fun.
And what new elements did you hope to bring to season 14?
I was just trying to do a little bit of a different take, kind of adding, the colors. I'm really inspired by how we have so much pops of color on the show. So it's really just taking kind of what we already have been doing, but now making it more mine and, adding my own flair and personality to it.
And what kind of color, schemes did you work with, the color palette in terms of bringing your own personality?
See, it's tough because on Drag Race, we use a lot of different colors. So, it's like, I don't know if this is a particular palette, but it is getting to play with the colors because
the whole palette, basically.
Yeah, there seems to be no color off limits, except for sometimes green. But, for the most part, we get to use all the different colors.
And you're nominated for the episode Catwalk, where the top 5 performed in their own music video. What stood out to you in that episode in terms of your design?
The episode itself was a homage to George Michael's Too Funky video, which to me was, I'm a person from the 90s, and to me it's like a very iconic video. So it was really a joy to try to bring this to life in our own Drag Race version of it. So to me, it was just great to take that and make it our own. And that whole set just kind of was the vision of, Bru's vision to take the original Too Funky and again, make it, Drag Race.
Was this your first time designing for a music video?
No, I've done some in the past, just at smaller level music videos. So this is more on a bigger scale.
Yeah, and how does that kind of work compare to any other episode of the show?
Well, the final episode is, it's a penultimate episode, and the queens all season have been working very hard on different challenges. So the final queens that are in this episode, it's an emotional experience for them and for us, because these sets, in this set in particular, it transports them and it immerses them into, you're in this actual music video. So to them, they've worked so hard to get to this point that it's an accomplishment. So it's just trying to give them the best experience possible, because really these different episodes are giving them the best experience possible with these different themes, these different episodes.
And building that catwalk itself, did that inspiration come directly from the George Michael video? Was there any other inspirations to that visually?
There was a little bit of, working with producers and Ru is like you take a little bit of everything and, make it like an homage, but also take a little bit of our own little backstage area, how we would have it, kind of like how we would have our version of the runway. So, so it's not a direct, but it is like influenced.
And, there's clearly a lot of creativity work went into another episode this season, the Rusical as always, and this was Moulin Rouge, which had its own iconic, the film had its own iconic production design. What was it like working on that one?
I loved that episode because we got to take, actual Moulin Rouge and make it our own version of it. And what it was cool to be able to do was take our set as the runway and transform it again into something that it's not, so you can't really tell you're in the runway itself. And it was very simple, the design, but but with the queens and the performances, it really all together was just great as a whole.
And do you take creative inspiration when creating the sets from the queens themselves, either past or present, kind of, the aesthetic of anyone?
Yeah, definitely. I've been on the show for 10 seasons. So after a while, like stuff that I was never into, all of a sudden I'm into, and I don't know where it comes from. And I think it's just from years of absorbing everything around me. And so when I do things, I think about, I truly think about them being in the situations, like with the queens, or like what adding them in, how would it look? Seeing all these queens have very different personalities, very different styles. And so the sets try to like figure out like how would the queens look in these sets.
Yeah, and you're also creating this, you're creating this opulence, but you're also giving the queens the chance to kind of be the stars of the show. What's it like,
exactly.
Maintaining that balance?
Exactly. I mean, every season we try to like elevate and get better with each look. Like we're trying to outdo, like, hey, look, how can we make this better than last season? And in doing that, you're also like, how can we make this better for the queens? How can we highlight these queens' talents? And because it is a competition, so it is testing all their abilities and skills. So within that, it's like, how does the set elevate the queens, but also it is the set, so we can't take too much away from them, but we also have to have some elements of design in a set.
And one of the most important locations for the queens every season is the workroom, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what work went into that this season, and were there significant changes and differences?
I think with the workroom, it's trying to maintain that, when we had COVID, the first filming of COVID, we had to expand the workroom. So, there are restrictions with the workroom with COVID regulations, because we have to make it bigger space-wise. So there wasn't too many differences with the workroom. The only main difference is that was carried on from the past few seasons was COVID and having to make the workroom bigger. But, not too many major differences from, the past few seasons, just except for the bigger workroom.
And what do you hope to give the audience in terms of the feeling that they get when they watch the show and they experience all the visual elements of it?
With the audience, I just really they're there for the queens, but they also are watching the sets as well. So again, it's just making it a fun experience, because a lot of people watch together. So it's to make to make people feel good, and feel good about the queens. Also telling the story behind, besides the sets, you're getting into their lives. So it's a mixture of things. It's very different from a scripted show, obviously. So it's hard to put in words some things that a scripted show could say, because it is a main element are the queens. So.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your work on the show, on your Emmy nomination for the show, and thank you so much for talking with me about it.
Thank you.
Welch, you're Emmy nominated for Outstanding Production Design for a half-hour program for the premiere episode of Schmigadoon, which is inspired by musicals of the 40s and 50s. Is this your first time designing for a musical?
Yes, it is. And I hope it's not my last, because I loved it.
How familiar were you with the musicals of the 40s and 50s that the show is paying homage to, or was that something completely new to you?
I had a very sort of shallow understanding of the musicals of the 40s and 50s, but our showrunner, Cinco Paul, who's deeply immersed in the world of 40s and 50s musicals, and who wrote the music and the scripts, was kind enough to send links to all of the relevant musicals. And so I spent days just watching musicals, and it gave me a newfound appreciation and a much deeper understanding of their appeal and also their corniness and they were really fun. It was really fun to do that, total immersion, let it come in one end and see what happens on the backside, filtered through our own sensibilities.
And what were some of your favorite, musicals or details, as you were, going on that deep dive that you wanted to bring into the show?
You know what? I can't single one of those out because I watched so many. But you can't beat Gene Kelly, his dancing, whether Singing in the Rain, Rigadoon. I mean, just the way he moved, just mind blowing. It was so elegant. I give him a thumbs up.
And designing for a musical, what kind of considerations go into the design when you have to have musical numbers and choreography in mind for whatever you're creating?
Everything I do has to accommodate song and dance, and when you watch them, you see there's a great deal of physicality involved in these dancers, and our dancers were, oh my God, they were so good. So you had to, for their own safety, create surfaces and spaces that they're not going to, trip, fall, skid, whatever, while dancing and singing. And then the other consideration is how many people are in a given number at any given time. How far are they going to come upstage, downstage, left, right? So you factor all that into composing images.
And how did you settle on a color palette for the show with Cinco and with the costume department? How was that visual decided?
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about that, as always. But in looking at the old musicals, there was kind of a palette that I don't even know how you describe it. I think ultimately between costumes and the sets, we landed on what I would call colorful, but also pushing sort of into the Sherberts, so that it had a slightly vintagey feel, but colorful. And of course, the material is framed in each episode by a brief interlude in contemporary real world settings, which we also built. And those were deliberately desaturated to the point of almost black and white, so that there's a contrast with this idealized fantastical world of Schmigadoon. So it was, there was a contemporary, desaturated, boring frame around this beautiful Schmigadoon world. That was the sort of the concept palette-wise.
And I love how the sets sort of play with this kind of, it looks like the set of a town, and there's so much beauty to it. And just playing with the sort of artificiality of it. Tell me about sort of working on that and creating that to sort of balance that sense of here's a real place, here's a kind of.
I think that's the trickiest part, is finding the level of artificiality where you don't distract from the narrative, and it's beautiful enough that you want to be there, but it's artificial enough that it is reminiscent of these 40s and 50s musicals, which when they were done were aiming for realism, but from today's perspective, everyone looks at it on their 4K device, and you can see the artifice. So there was a lot of dialogue about that, and I think we landed in a good spot where it had artificiality, but you still, by virtue of building it and putting these incredibly talented performers in it, you buy it, and there's a sense of joy that is contagious throughout all 6 episodes, I think. I watched it as a fan, not just the production designer. I absolutely love this material and would watch it with a smile plastered on my face every Friday when it dropped.
And you worked with director Barry Sonnenfeld on the show. And of course, you've worked multiple times with him over the course of your careers. And you often create these really heightened imaginative worlds together. What about that partnership has made you two work so well together so consistently?
Well, I adore Barry Sonnenfeld and his sense of humor. He's one of the smartest people I know, and his sense of humor, his skill with a camera is unmatched. He's really great to work with, and completely honest and candid. And I think that comes across. There's just something very present about his work. And he likes to do things, he likes stylization and likes to build on stage, and so do I. We have a shared sensibility in that regard. And I can't imagine doing a show like this, which is a pretty fresh and great concept. But if I didn't have the shorthand with him, so much, he called me during right when the COVID outbreak happened, and said, we're looking at this, da, 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 and I checked it out and read it, and I loved it. But so much of the prep is done the way we're doing this right now on Zoom. And something's lost when you're not face to face with people. But so we prepped it, and then the COVID got worse, and we're on again, off again. I'm designing, I'm selling, and then the summer came along and we were put on pause. And then sometime in August, they said, go. And we had a ridiculously short window to crank out this town, woods, carnival, all this stuff, and have it ready for rehearsals in like September. So it was a real scramble, and it was pre-vaccine. And so there's, all the testing and not knowing, and it was rough. It was pretty tough, but fantastic crew in Vancouver. Never any whiners, never anybody. They share the enthusiasm that we had for the material, and that's what you want. You want people who get it, who share that enthusiasm, and just dive headlong into it, regardless of masks and testing, and so that's how that went down. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah, absolutely.
is that part of the Barry question? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I love working with Barry. We have a great time together. Yeah.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your Emmy nomination and on your work on the show. It's a pleasure to just feast your eyes on, and it's been a pleasure talking about it. Jeremy Hindle, you're nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Production Design for a Contemporary Program for Severance, for the first episode, Good News About Hell, that sets the tone for all the strangeness to come. What did you think about just the concept when you first read the scripts?
I mean, it's the script, honestly, Ben sent it to me first, and I read it. It's amazing. The writing's amazing, but it wasn't like a visual language to the show. And what I love was that I know Ben is quite visual. So I thought I put a lookbook together for him, and we met 3 days later, and I kind of had just an idea of how I thought the show could look. And we met, and I showed it to him because I wanted to make sure that it's what I would want to do and what he would want to do. And it was pretty adventurous. And we were both just clicked, like we totally clicked into how far we could push it. But it was the strangest show because it's not like anything anyone's ever seen. And it wasn't, finding the tone for the show was You know, it's an office environment. It read like an office show. It read like The Office, but the writing was strange and the environments were, you know, hinted at, but it wasn't, it really needed a world of its own to kind of take us on this journey with these people, like, and how, what we learned over, you know, the first few months was that they're, you know, this company's experimenting on the people, and it kind of gave me, I realized that I could experiment on them. You know, everything is sort of designed and manipulated for them. They're children, basically. They're birthed into this office space. So, and once I realized that I could be the person, this kind of godlike creature too, that could actually come up with things to play with them, play with the actors, and make them, put them in places that were uncomfortable or interesting or surreal. And really what we learned quickly was the scale was going to be what the show was about. It had to be like the MDR room had to be the most, you know, we're going to be in it for 3 hours the first season. So it had to be tonally and scale-wise the most interesting room, that it would feel like surveillance, but it's not surveillance. We really want to be with them. We want to interact with them. They are children-like, so it had this like childlike kind of feel to their desk area where they could play with it a little bit. It was kind of an adventure for, it's the most collaborative I've ever been to work with, like Ben and the writer and just the DP, like the four of us really clicked, and we really push each other in every way. Like we take Dan's script and we all have tons of opinions, and Dan writes with our opinions and our ideas, and we all kind of amalgamate to, it was such a fun process, but chaotic for the first season for a lot of people, because we didn't really know what the show was going to look like till it was cut. Like it was pretty strange.
And the offices have kind of this futuristic feel, but also kind of this retro feel at the same time. What were some of the inspirations and references you used for it?
I mean, the reason I kind of intentionally, I thought, if we're in this environment and you're underground and it's designed to be the perfect workspace, I thought, let's just go back to when the perfect workspace existed, like 50s, 60s. And it really was, to me, was always Kevin Roche and Eero Saarinen had done this John Deere office. Like John Deere tractors had the most beautiful offices you've ever seen. And so it was like, that's kind of should be our look. Like it's the perfect desk, it's the perfect pen, the perfect Rolodex, the perfect phone. There's no personal, you know, before human resources took over the office and said, bring your family, sit here for 14 hours a day, bring your plants, bring your, you know, your life. It was just work. So it felt like, okay, if that's what people are going back to, this is the environment, it should have that same killer look and feel to it that's super professional and stunning to look at. And then when I came to New York, I live in LA, quickly someone showed me, you know, I knew the Bell Labs, which was the same designers as John Deere, like with Saarinen and Kevin Roche. And I always thought it was condemned. It was like closed down for 20 years. It was defunct, but someone had just finished restoring it. So we approached them, we went to see it, and you know, and we kind of made a collaboration with them that we could be the first people to shoot the building. Because what we really wanted to do is everything in the show had to be unseen. It was something this can't be a world that anyone knows. It can't be a location anyone's ever seen before. And it happened to fall in our laps. That was the same designers, same concept. So the exterior and that front entrance is in our same language. And it's funny how you put something into the world and things come back to you at the same time. Like you put out what you want and things do come together, and it's amazing. Like we had luck and opportunity at the same time.
And tell me about creating all those maze-like corridors. Like how do you create that sense of endlessness and kind of that winding?
There are so many hallways. It's insane. Like Ben wanted to do like a 2-minute walk, and it's basically every set was designed, like we designed every set and how much stage space we had, and we built hallways. It's like a maze all the way around and around and around and around. And the key is that when you first come off this narrow elevator into this little lobby area, the first hallways are like a certain width, and then they get a little bit wider. As you progress, they get wider. So that when you get to the crossroads, that it feels wider, that you're like, okay, now where do I go? Because in Dan's head, the writer, this goes for miles underground, like miles, you know. So for the seasons ahead, it's like a city underground. There's so much going on. But it was basically, you know, what's interesting about the narrowness is they all have to walk sort of single file at first, and then when they come to the crossroads, they can kind of walk four abreast, like they're all kind of there together. Like you feel them kind of team building together, which is fun.
And of course, there's the world of the Lumen offices, and then there's the world of the Audis, their lives on the outside world. What visual similarities and differences did you want to bring to that other, half of their lives?
I mean, I guess the key for us was that we didn't really ever want to know what the time period was. Like everything underground, the computers were our own look because Lumen would design everything and it would be in their own. So if you ever came out into the real world, it wouldn't make any sense. But also when we got into the outside world, we're like, the cars, we wanted everyone to live in sort of Frank Lloyd Wright-ish houses in Pleasantville. And it was still to have a really nice design element to the show, but also just like the colors would be the key change. It would be like warm. There'd be a fireplace. There'd be, there's no, in underground, it's always white, blue, green. And the only new colors would come from wardrobe. Like Helly might introduce a new color in her wardrobe. And then in the outside world, it would just be just enough that it was like comfortable enough to feel warm. And just a slight contrast to the inside. And always winter, because we still wanted to keep the white look. It's always about having enough white in the show.
And the macro data refinement office is, one of the most important locations on the show, and it's especially unsettling because you have that gigantic room, that green carpet, and that little workstation for 4 people. What were the kind of considerations that went into that and how that looked?
I mean, when Dan wrote it, Dan wrote 4 desks, large room, and which was great. It was like, okay, large room, I love that. And what I really was always fascinated was having a really low ceiling. I think it's 7 feet 9 inches. It's really like John Turturro's 6'5". It's really low. And the key was to really make it feel claustrophobic, but also spacious. It's really unsettling when you're in it. And it's also really enhances, I think, performances. It makes people feel uncomfortable because it is uncomfortable. But it's also the key, like the green is like, it's kind of like grass, like a playground. The 4 consoles is basically it's on one post centered in the middle, suspended, that it's kind of like the umbilical cord of all this math that they're playing with the numbers, that it was underground to whatever, because they're doing something on these numbers that controls something underground. So it's like, this is where the information comes from, and this is where it goes. And then we've all shot a million offices, and their dividers are always a nightmare because they kill eye lines, and they're just, so I was like, what if they can play with them? What if they can just manipulate it with one finger up and down? And when I knew John Turturro was in it, I thought this was going to be amazing. And of course, he's the one that does it. And it was trying to create an environment that, because we're in it for so long, that it was good. The show had to be playful. Like, have you ever seen the movie Playtime? Jacques Tati, like it's all sets. It's this really fantastical 60s film, and we based a lot of the concept on the show should be playful. These people they're being experimented on. They're playing with their characters. They're playing with their humanity. So we were like, at the same time, it gave me the gift to play with them in every way possible, which was, what can I do to make things fun for them at the same time? Like, what are they doing here?
Well, I want to congratulate you on the show and the unique world that you created, and congratulations on your Emmy nomination. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks so much.
Chae Kyoung-sun, you're an Emmy nominee for Outstanding Production Design for Squid Game. And the episode you're nominated for is Gambu. What made that episode special to you?
네, 안녕하세요. 리반님께서는 에미상 프로덕션 디자인상 부문에 노미네이트가 되셨는데 6부 깐부로 출품이 된 것으로 알고 있습니다. 왜 이렇게 6화가 특별한 걸까요?
일단 반갑습니다. 제가 어쨌든 오징어 게임의 9가지의 어떤 에피소드 중에서 6부를 해외의 시청자들이 되게 많이 사랑하시는다고 들었는데, 그 이유가 아마 다양한 인간의 어떤 감정과, 그다음에 자기가 자기 스스로도 잘 모르는 자기 안의 어떤 내부의 욕망과 어떤 삶과 죽음에 대한 두려움들, 인간에 대한 어떤 되게 다양한 감정들, 그다음에 이해관계들이 6부에 되게 많이 표현이 돼 있다고 생각을 해요. 그래서 그런 것들을 시청자들이 공감을 많이 가지지 않았나 싶고요. 미술적으로는 어쨌든 가짜와 진짜의 어떤 경계선에 있게 뭐 석양이라던가 골목길의 어떤 뭐 마감재라던가 구성들을 약간의 이중적인 면을 조금 이렇게 덧입혀서 디자인을 한 부분들이 좀 이색적으로 시청자분들께서 다가가지 않으셨나 뭐 그렇게 생각합니다.
Right. First of all, it's very nice to meet you. And I believe that out of the 9 episodes of Squid Game, episode 6 is likely to be the favorite of our foreign viewers. And I think this is because the episode deals with the various emotions of different types of human beings. And it also tackles that urge and desire within somebody that people aren't even aware of, and the fundamental fear over life and death, and various interests that people have. And I think this is all comprehensively reflected into episode 6, and that's why many people around the world is resonating so deeply with it. And in terms of production design, we really try to focus on having everything border on real and fake, walk that very fine line between real and fake, such as the sunset, the evening glow, all the finishes that we use in bringing that alleyway to life. And we made sure that there was this ambivalence, a very fine line between two different things as we approached every single element in the alleyways. And I think this really struck the global audience as something eccentric.
And yeah, I've read that you said before that the marble set, those alleyways, were your favorite set of the season. What made that set, why did you like that set so much?
네, 그 구슬치기 하는 세트장이 가장 미간님께서 좋아하셨던 세트장이었다고 전에 말씀하신 걸 들었는데요. 왜 그렇게 꼽으신 걸까요, 특별하게?
제가 이제 시나리오를 받고 감독님이랑 되게 많은 이야기들 나눌 때 되게 다양한 어떤 이야기들을 많이 했는데 그 중에서 감독님께서 유년 시절에 대한 이야기, 되게 어려웠었던 스스로의 유년 시절의 이야기를 많이 하셨을 때 친구들이랑 막 골목길에서 7, 80년대에 놀면은 해가 이렇게 뉘엿뉘엿 지는 어떤 석양을 뒤로하고 엄마가 막 밥 먹으라고 막 이렇게 소리쳤대요. 동혁아 밥 먹어 막 그런 유년 시절의 그 향기, 약간 향수 같은 것들을 이 오징어 게임의 6부에 좀 표현하고 싶다라고 말씀을 하셨었어요. 그리고 다른 공간들은 저에게 상상력을 되게 많이 이렇게 불어넣어서 미술 감독의 역할, 그다음 미술 감독이 창작할 수 있게 열어주셨는데 그 6부 같은 경우는 감독님이 어떤 유년 시절의 향수를 좀 불러일으켜야 되겠다라는 어떤 저희 욕심에 7, 80년대 우리나라 사진 작가들 자료도 많이 받고 지금은 남아있지 않지만 그 시대의 어떤 골목길을 꼭 재현하고 싶었어요. 그래서 애착이 많은 공간이기도 한데 그냥 그대로의 고증과 재현보다는 오징어 게임만의 또 세계, 오징어 게임만의 개인장을 또 만들어야 됐기 때문에 가짜 석양을 감독님의 아이디어로 제가 4개의 그 해를 이렇게 석양을 만들어 놨고요. 그다음에 연극적인 요소를 조금 주어서 사실 그러니까 그 지붕하고 문으로만 만들어진 골목이에요. 거기가. 그래서 사실 대문은 있는데 대문을 열고 들어가면은 자기의 집이 없는 거예요. 그러니까 이 참가자들이 스스로 집에 가고 싶지만 어쨌든 집으로 돌아가지 못하는 어떤 그런 절박한 상황들을 좀 다른 좀 표현으로 약간 연극적인 어떤 이중적인 면 그런 것들로 구조를 해서 골목길이 좀 탄생된 거죠. 디자인도 되게 많은 디자인 시안들이 나왔었던 공간이기도 합니다.
When I first received the script, the director and I shared a lot of conversations, and he also talked a lot about his childhood to me, about the times when the family wasn't very well off during the 1970s and 80s, when he would play in the alleyways with his friends, and by dinner time, his mom would call him to come home, and he wanted to really bring that nostalgia back in that scene. So for the other scenes or the other games, I had a lot of freedom and a lot of room for maneuver, and he left it pretty much up to me. But for this scene specifically, I really wanted to live up to the director's expectations. So I used a lot of 70s, 80s picture references of the alleyways of those times, although they don't really remain these days that much. And I wanted to make it historically authentic and at the same time very unique in terms of the Squid Game arena. So I created 4 sunsets, printed out 4 sunsets, and installed them in all the 4 different directions. And I tried to arrange it as a theater stage of sorts. So if you look closely into the alleyway space, it's mostly made of roofs and doors, and there's no actual home behind that door. So although these contestants are so desperately trying to return home, they can't. I wanted to highlight that irony. And that's why I tried to arrange the design elements in a sort of 2-dimensional manner. We had a lot of design options, and this was the final one that we went for.
And the show includes a lot of bright colors, a lot of these kind of playground colors. How did you decide what colors to use over the course of the series on the sets, and what effects did you want them to have?
네, 이 작품에 걸쳐서 굉장히 비비드하고 알록달록한 색깔의 사용이 많이 보이는데요. 어떤 색깔을 사용할지는 어떻게 정하셨고, 이런 것들이 시청자들에게 어떤 임팩트를 가졌으면 하는 마음이 있으셨나요?
이것도 이제 감독님이랑 되게 많은 이야기를 나눴는데, 시나리오 상에서 어떤 컬러가 지정되어 있는 글들은 없었어요. 이것도 사실 캐릭터의 어떤 옷을 입힐지, 어떤 의상을 입힐지에 대해서 시나리오에 다 나와 있진 않았고, 그것 또한 의상실장님이랑 저랑 이제 상상의 날개를 펼쳐야 됐었는데, 제가 어쨌든 미술 감독으로서 이 오징어 게임의 전체적인 색감을 가져가려고 했을 때, 기존의 서바이벌 게임이나 제스 게임처럼 우울하고 좀 어둡고 약간의 명암 처리가 있는 어떤 그런 느낌의 그 기존의 영상 비주얼보다는 좀 새롭게 도전을 좀 하고 싶어서, 어떤 죽음을 상징하는 색으로 우리가 관념적으로 이야기하는 블랙이나 뭐 그레이나 이런 거를 좀 배제하고 약간은 유화적이고 좀 아동적인 어떤 그런 컬러감을 좀 가져가 보자라는 게 첫 번째 시도였었어요. 그런 어떤 비주얼을 만들어감에 있어서. 그래서 7, 80년대에 저희 어떤 교과서 일러스트라던가 저희가 갖고 있는 크레파스 색감이라던가, 그래서 약간 동화적인 어떤 컬러감을 가져가자가 이제 첫 번째 저희 첫 컬러 회의였고요. 그랬을 때 이제 의상실장님께서 적극적으로 그런 감시자들에게 핑크색을 좀 한번 입혀보자. 그래서 거기에 너무 다 같이 호응을 했죠. 저희가 감독님도 그렇고 저도 그렇고 촬영 감독님도 그렇고, 좋다, 핑크색으로 한번 저희 도전해보자. 그래서 되게 쉽게 컬러 맵들이 좀 정해졌던 것 같아요. 오징어 게임의 컬러 맵들이 핑크색이 저희가 관념적으로 뭐 유화적이고 우유부단하고 약간 여성적이고 그런 느낌의 관념의 어떤 컬러감을 배제하고 오징어 게임만의 색깔을 저희끼리 저희 오징어 게임 세계에서는 만들어 가보자. 그래서 핑크색은 죽음과 두려움과 그다음에 약간 억압과 통제를 상징하는 컬러로서 쓰이길 바랬던 거예요. 그래서 그거에 반대되는 어떤 초록 색깔이라 함은 일꾼들, 이 감시자들에게는 좀 귀찮은 존재, 이들을 통제해야 되는 존재, 일적인 존재로 만드는 초록색으로 약간 명명하게 되는 컬러감을 이렇게 지정하는 그런 맵을 만들어 갔고요. 그 컬러 군들이 만들어지면서 저희 오징어의 그 공간에서도 그 컬러를 자유롭게 쓸 수 있고 혹은 배치하면서 쓸 수 있고 그렇게 되면서 알록달록한, 그다음에 윤영기 시절에 접했었던 비비드한 컬러들이 사실은 되게 무섭고 자기의 죽음도 앗아갈 수 있는 이 게임장에 펼쳐진다는 것이 되게 아이러니한 느낌을 조금 보여드리고 싶었고, 삶이라는 것도 그런 거 아닌가 이런 생각이 들었고요. 그 컬러가 갖고 있는 고정관념을 좀 떨치는 비주얼을 시청자들한테 보여주고 싶었습니다.
Right, so the director and I also shared a lot of conversations on the color scheme as well, but the specific colors weren't written into the script, as in which colored tracksuits they would be dressed in. So the costume designer and I had a lot of freedom on deciding upon that. So we also talked a lot about the overall color scheme. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to divert from that very typical death game, survival game color tones. People mostly associate death with black or gray or other grim, bleak colors, but we wanted to really depart from those kind of visuals. That's why we wanted to go with childish, very infantile, vivid colors. So I referenced a lot of illustrations in the 70s, 80s textbooks, and also the colorful crayons that we would use when we were children. So at the very first meeting, we decided to go with a very fairy tale-like color scheme. And then somebody immediately came up with the idea of dressing the masked men in a pink tracksuit. And then the director and I and the DP also loved that idea. So I think that's how we came to agree on the color map very easily. Pink is a color that's mostly associated with like something feminine and childish, but we wanted to establish a completely new meaning in that color. So that pink would symbolize death and fear and control. And green, which would be in contrast to that, the contestants are dressed in green, which would mean their responsibility or something that has to be controlled by the masked men. So as we came to decide on these very basic key colors, we had a lot of freedom in deciding the other colors as well. So we also decided to go with the vivid color tones for the other choices as well, so that it would evoke a very fundamental, fearful, ironic feeling about life. And I think the basic idea was to kind of break all the pre-existing stereotypes associated with the colors.
And did you expect how popular and impactful this show would be around the world?
이렇게까지 전 세계적인 인기가 많을 거라고 예상하셨나요?
아니요, 전혀 몰랐고요. 저는 그 한국에서 어쨌든 영화 작업을 오랫동안 하다 보니까 이렇게 새로운 도전을 한 것도 처음이고, 그다음 시리즈물을 이제 작업한 것도 처음이에요. 또 감독님도 처음이지만 저도 처음이고, 그래서 어떻게 받아들일까 시청자들이 되게 두려웠었어요. 사실 저희의 어떤 이런 과감한 도전과 감독님의 과감한 비주얼에 대한 어떤 응원들이 시청자들께서 너무 이렇게 부담스럽거나 혹은 이렇게 왜 저렇게 했지라는 어떤 그런 의심을 좀 갖지 않을까라고 생각을 했었지, 이렇게 막 폭발적인 인기를 받게 될 줄은 몰랐는데, 어쨌든 저희가 되게 섬세하게 노력하고 어떤 이야기를 하려고 또 비주얼을 이렇게 만들려고 도전한 거에 대해서 알아봐 주신 거에 대해서 무척 너무 감사하고 고맙습니다.
No, not at all. I did not expect for this to happen. I've mostly worked on Korean films throughout my career, so this was a new challenge for me. It was my first time doing a series. It was both a first for the director and for me as well. So I was a little concerned about how the audiences would react. The director and I tried to make very bold and daring choices, and I thought I was worried that people might think this was too over the top maybe, or like doubt our choices, why we made those decisions. But I think the fact that it became so popular, I'm very grateful for that. And I think people really recognize the fact that we paid attention to the very smallest details. And yeah, I'm very happy and thankful.
Well, I'm thankful for you for talking to me about the show today. And I want to congratulate you on your Emmy nomination. It's been a pleasure talking.
네, 오늘 시간 내주셔서 너무 감사드리고 또 후보에 오르신 점도 축하드립니다.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery here with Emmy-nominated production designers Francesca di Mottola from The Great, Bill Groom from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Gianna Costa from RuPaul's Drag Race, Welch from Schmigadoon, and Jeremy Hindle from Severance. You all work on such different projects, but in general, like, what's your favorite part in the process of production design? Let's start with Jeremy.
My favorite is, it's funny, I'm going to teach a class on it this year. It's story and daydreaming. Like, I like reading it, and then I like daydreaming and fighting the fact that you figure out how to do it. Like, because there's, most people, you always want to panic and go, how are we ever going to do this? It's just giving yourself the gift to read it, enjoy it, and just literally daydream everything that you could possibly daydream first without any budget, any other conversations. So just be free.
And how about you, Gianna?
Oh, I love searching for references and just going on deep dives, which is very easy for me to do. And just finding very interesting things to pull into a set, looking at currently what's going on, what happened in the past. And I have so many folders of images, it's ridiculous, but I could spend hours upon hours of finding cool references of things.
And Bo?
Some depends on the show. Sometimes I'm happiest when it's over. Very often, but in this case of Schmigadoon, what was really great was, we build this town, and because of of COVID, it was very restricted who could come in, who could come and go. And one day, the entire cast and all the core dancers came in to the set and started dancing, and that blew my mind to see. Hi, I'm waving to my wife outside. To see all the dancers, start dancing and singing, and have this huge inanimate object become so alive. Just, I wept. So that would be it.
That's nice.
And Bill?
I think for me, it's the discovery phase of the project. And you have a script, and then you start getting into it with the research and all the references and all of that, conversations with the director, and just discovering what the show is. And sometimes it'll be as simple for me, as simple as a sofa that just seems perfect for a particular set, or a location that seems perfect. And you don't know exactly why, but then you see the next thing that's kind of perfect, and the next thing, and then you start to say to yourself, what are these things telling me about the show? And kind of move on from there. That's the phase of it that I enjoy the most, I think.
And Francesca?
I think for me, it's all of those together, really. It's part daydreaming and part is the finding through research. So it's like letting yourself really go deep down inside the material and getting lost, and then finding what's the key to either the show or a scene, or understanding what's, what is going to make finding the tone, or what will make that set unique. And it could be, as Bill said, it could be a sofa, it could be just a whole idea. And ultimately, what I really enjoy after this process is the collaboration with, if you get the right team. I think that for me is so special. And on this show, I've been super lucky because I felt like I've had the opportunity to sort of dive into what is for me great material, and through research find something that I cling to, and it's an idea, and then it just develops through the collaboration with the team and with everyone. So in the art department, in the set decoration, the graphics, and it all sort of comes together. And in this show, we make everything. So like the prop makers are so important, the sculptors, and that is, for me, it's like the biggest joy. It's when it all comes together, or when it starts coming together.
And on the flip side, what's the least favorite part, or if not least favorite, like the most challenging part of production design in your experience, Francesca?
So what I find quite painful is, and can be really enjoyable if it works, is location hunting. So it's just like looking and just like what works and what doesn't work, and it can be just eternal. And if you're working on a project, I mean, I've been building now a lot on this show, and equally we do have locations, but when I'm working on smaller projects and it's mainly location based, it's just like how long it just takes to it can take to find the right location. And on the flip side, when you do, it's like, boom, magic.
How about you, Bill?
Sometimes it's the time involved to sort something out, and whether it's a location, as Francesca said, or just solving a problem with some other design element. But you know, especially in television, which I've been doing now for a few years, it's time is a real issue, and you're under a lot of pressure, and to solve some very important to make some very important decisions, solve some important problems very quickly. And I would say that.
Bo?
Me?
Mhm.
I think time, you know, that crunch between go and when it has to be done, that can be pretty exhausting. But and then the other aspect of time are sometimes the hours are horrible, you know. Generally speaking, you know, not awful, but you know, sometimes when you're shooting in television or streaming, as we call it, and the days they keep pushing the start. By the end of the week, you're destroying your weekend. Those are horrible. You should avoid those at all costs.
Gianna?
Definitely time, also a bit of budget. You know, being constrained with, you know, limitations, because, you know, for me, it's like I have these great ideas, but, you know, within the time and within the budget, with the way a lot of reality shows are filmed, we don't have a lot of time, especially on this show, since there's a new episode every other day. But at the same time, like the stress that I get, I also like the challenge of it, and trying to problem solve. So it is kind of like a balance of that. Like the mornings where I wake up going, oh my God, is everything okay? And we're going to be fine today. And then when everything's fine, it's like, okay, you know, the release of that. But it definitely, time and budget is huge stress.
Jeremy?
It's funny, it's really on television. I noticed this is the first series I've done, and I think it's the turnaround of scripts is really trying. It's waiting for scripts. They're always, you know, you know a lot of the ideas, but they're always so last minute that they really click, and then it is time. But that's really, to me, like in a film, it doesn't really ever happen. I always feel like you know that you have the script. It doesn't really happen that way, but it definitely on a TV series, it's a little, and having multiple directors can be a little trying. You know, some are stronger, some are weaker. But I would definitely say it's just timing of scripts.
It's funny that time is coming up with everybody, and I did features for years, and you know, you may have a set and you're thinking, well, I'll have to have that ready in 3 months, and you have a little time to sort of think about it and all that. In television, it's, you know, we have to have that on Thursday. It's like, you know, it's a lot of pressure there.
I'm glad that it's not just reality TV then, because I thought it was just reality TV.
No.
I mean, honestly, I think it's most people. I think I hate working a crew, like especially art department. I love everyone to do like an 8 to 6:30.
Right. It's like doing a commercial.
It's trying to keep people on a happy lifestyle too, and actually be really productive. No one can 14 hours. People are terrible. I'm terrible at 12 hours. I'm horrible. Everybody, like, I'd rather burn really fast for 10 hours, but a lot of times those decisions don't get made that fast.
If the sky was the limit and you had unlimited resources and unlimited time, you know, is there something that you would most love to build or create, or like a kind of style that you'd like to work in? You know, Bo, how about you?
No, I would hate that. I would hate the unlimited thing, because it would just be a bottomless pit of, you know, your imagination would take you into rabbit holes of hell, and you would never get out of it. I like having the restrictions, time, money. It makes it better. It's just, and I like the tension. I like the, there's something, you know, it's a show within a show when you're struggling to figure this stuff out and crank it out and make it happen. It's its own narrative story that can be very exciting and rewarding, or hellish. Usually it's fun. Come on, kidding me?
Bill?
I completely agree with Bo. I remember starting out in college thinking I was going to be an artist, and I would stare at a blank canvas, and that was the most frightening thing. And when I discovered theater and had a script in my hand that said that they need to come in the door and down the stairs and whatever, it was so great for me to have that kind of structure. And that's what I loved about it. And I still like that. I do like the limitations that are set, and the opportunities that are in front of you with the script.
Francesca?
No, absolutely. I think if you've got limitations, you know what you're working to. But I mean, if I had a dream project, it would be something that, I mean, I trained for theater, so I just love the idea of sort of moving walls and worlds opening into other worlds. So sort of a show that allowed you to design for different worlds, or, you know, going, I don't know, I have something in my mind, maybe I need to write it, but yeah, a moving set, or I'm sure it's been done and it's in my mind somewhere.
Jeremy?
I mean, it's the same. I think, I mean, we work in a collaborative process with so many people. I think you would never get anything done. I mean, I've done a million commercials. I've done $20 million movies and $150 million movies, and they're never, you just run out of time no matter what. You just, if you're with the right people, no matter what, it is really fun. And I think for me, it's just picking the right people to work with, not just your crew, but it's picking the right director to work with to me is the most important. That's all I think about. And if I'm in sync with them enough, and we don't have to be together, we can like fight and battle it out. But I think that's the goal, is to be with the right people. And then everyone has good etiquette about how to manage the time and how to push each other to make something great. And you need to start shooting eventually.
And Gianna?
I personally need restrictions and structure, or else, well, not necessarily structure, but the limitations, or else I'll never get anything done, because I get easily distracted by a million different ideas. But I would love to work more in a scripted environment where like different period pieces, and again, to get lost in something. You know, reality TV has its limitations with some sets. The reason why I love Drag Race is because I do get to do a version of like scripted shows on these different sets. But I would love to do like period pieces, or, you know, just get immersed in history and, you know, that kind of world.
Well, I want to thank you all for joining me today for this discussion, and, you know, for talking to me individually and together as a group about such different projects and such different creativity. And congratulations again to all of you on your Emmy nominations this year. It's been a pleasure.